All right, hello, and welcome back to the Chase Notes podcast, taping this on a Wednesday afternoon. Katie Sharp is here. Katie Sharp, everyone on baseball Twitter, not just Yankees Twitter, have known about Katie for years and years, just doing great work, not only covering the Yankees, but Major League Baseball as a whole. Katie, it's a delight to be joined by you on the program this afternoon. How are you?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me, Chase. I'm really excited to talk some Yankees with you, and hopefully we'll have a good conversation here.
Absolutely. Now, if I recall, though, you had like a banner of Navy in your banner at one point, and my dad's a retired Marine. My grandfather was in the Navy in World War II. A lot of Navy Marines, same branch, so they're in the same. They're all okay. Trust me, when Navy Army comes around, the Marines are going for Navy. What is your relation to the Navy, and can you explain how they lost at home to the Delaware Blue Hens over the weekend? Because, Katie, you talked about liking college football. That was rough.
Oh, geez. Well, first, my relation to the Navy. My husband is in the Navy. He went to the academy, and he's been in ever since. So he's going on more than 20 years right now.
Oh wow.
So that's my connection. And we've been to a few Navy football games, haven't been to too many. But just love the sport. And as for explaining what happened last weekend, I have no word. I mean, there is no excuse for losing to an FCS team at home in the first game of the season. They're in trouble this season because their offense looks broken. And I don't know what can fix it.
It's bad because you fired the AD, fires the OC last year, and then there's a revolt, and he's brought back, and now it's still bad. I don't know. It's bleak.
I mean, I had high hopes. I mean, they had a lot of returning. They had a returning quarterback, which is always a good thing when you're in the triple option, when you're in Navy. If you can have experience at quarterback, that's really pretty much the fulcrum of the team. But yeah, that was pathetic. I couldn't watch. At some points, it was just there was no offense. There's no fluidity at all. So hoping for better times. Hoping to get out. We're gonna be going to the actually going to go into the Navy Air Force game.
Oh, nice.
Next month because we live in Colorado. My husband and I.
Hold on, I got something for you, Katie. Hold on, I got something for you for this game. All right. This is an authentic Air Force helmet.
Wow.
Yeah, they sent this to me when Coach Calhoun was on the program a few months back.
That's cool.
Yeah. Right?
Yeah, I like that.
Very cool. So I don't know. Air Force is just cool, man. Troy Calhoun's a cool dude. They're looking really good right out of the gate. I don't think it's going to be a great situation for you guys.
I'm a little nervous because that could be a bloodbath.
But great uniforms. I seem to recall they do a really good job of doing some alternates for Navy and Air Force. So there will be some cool ones. I think, was it last year that Navy wore Marine themed uniforms?
They did. Game? I believe that was for the Army Navy game though.
Was it? Okay.
But it was a theme. Yeah, it was, I forget what it was for, but yeah, it was like a navy with some like red and yellow piping.
Yes.
And some really cool designs with the Marines logo and but yeah. But I don't know about my Navy. My Navy football is not doing well.
Well, there's still time. Week 1, maybe they can bounce back. Maybe they can figure it out. Ken's won a lot of games in Navy. We'll see what happens. The long season.
Believe in Ken.
There you go. You're also the queen of stats at Talkin Yanks with just that John Boy Media, just gigantic, and Talkin Baseball is one of my favorite weekly listens, and Talkin Yanks and all those guys. Like, how did you get the title of Queen of Stats, Katie? Where did that come about?
Wow, I don't know. I don't think I've ever really been asked that, but it was probably from Jimmy or Jake. Probably from Jake. Just, some random time just called me that. When we were doing a podcast or something. But yeah, I really don't know. That's a good question. Really good question. But I like it. I mean, sure, cool.
Were you
doing
always a
stats.
stats person? Like, were you always kind of more of an analytical person, or did you get in? Was your love of baseball already well developed, and you were like, "Oh, this is just something that I do like numbers, and I can integrate this into my natural affinity for baseball." Or which came first for you?
Well, I mean, it's got to be baseball's first because
Okay.
that was like birth. Baseball was birth.
Mm-hmm.
My dad was a huge Yankees fan, so it was baseball was from birth, and I mean, but ever since I've really been in school, I definitely have had an affinity for stats, for
Mm-hmm.
math, for just kind of looking at things from an analytical viewpoint, doing research. I've always really enjoyed the research process.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a perfect marriage because baseball is a game of stats and it's very analytical, probably more so than other sports.
Mm-hmm.
So
I like it. I like it. Well, you cover a team right now, Katie, that has been in a free fall for a while, and it's been rough because there's really not. I wanted to get you on this podcast for this. One of these very reasons is just like the historical precedents of this kind of fall from grace, where we had just collectively as baseball fans just penciled in the Yankees' best record in the AL. Like, this is over. This is insane. This team is just going to be top notch. And it was interesting because going into the year, I don't think there was that same level of certainty around this team. No one thought, it seems like when you were talking to different folks with the Yankees and stuff like that, that it was like, oh, they should be good. They should be a playoff team, but they didn't feel like a juggernaut. There were questions at the shortstop spot. There were questions with what their starting rotation depth would look like. There were questions about the bullpen. There were questions about what this team would look like going into this year. And they answered the bell immediately and were an absolute juggernaut. And ever since, I guess it's now September 7th as we're recording this, it's almost 2 months of just the exact opposite. And Aaron Boone just aging 17 years in the last 2 months, managing this team. I pose this question to you, Katie. How would you best explain to folks who are not watching the Yankees every single night what's plaguing this baseball team right now?
well, first I want to kind of go back to your point about what you said at the beginning of the season. Like, their projections were for about 91, 92
Mm-hmm.
wins. If you look at either Vegas or Fangraphs or Baseball Prospectus, whatever kind of market you're looking at. So they were, and that that's what they might end up at.
Mm-hmm.
Like, or they probably should get to maybe 94, 95 wins, but that's what they're going to end up at. So it really is a tale of kind of the roller coaster ride that a season is for every team. They they were definitely playing above their skis for the first 2 or 3 months of the season, and now the water is just coming right back. Right, the tide is just coming in right now. So I just kind of wanted to point out that this is what happens during a season. You get this, if you go on this run, you get this huge hype, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you get this huge high, but the regression to the mean is real. It's a real thing. It's impossible to play at a 120. I mean, not impossible, but extremely difficult to play at a 120 win pace for an entire season, right? So now back to your question. The way that I would explain this collapse is it's been a complete offensive collapse over the last 2 months. And just some really stark numbers that I want to point out. And this is as a team. Over the last 30 days, the Yankees have scored the fewest runs in the AL. They have the lowest batting average, the second lowest OBP, and the lowest slugging percentage. That's over the last 30 days. And people will say, well, what about Judge, right? Well, yes. And this is even more ridiculous. If you break out what Judge is doing the last 30 days and what the Yankees are doing, it's like a triple. I mean, it's not even real. So I'll throw out these numbers for you. So Judge in the last 30 days, he's got 118 plate appearances, 11 home runs. He's hitting 306 with a 464 OBP and a 741 slugging, right? The other Yankees, so every other Yankee, 846 plate appearances, 14 home runs, a
Mm.
192 batting average, a 252 on base percentage, and a 280 slugging. So the entire offense, yes, is collapsing, but even if when you break it out between Judge and the rest of the team, it's even more stark. And you realize how much he is really literally carrying this team on his back right now.
Do you think it's weighed on him at all? Because it's interesting when we see a lot of superstar or middle of the lineup kind of guys, if the rest of the lineup just starts to fall apart around him, it makes, I mean, look at what Juan Soto was dealing with in Washington. Part of the reason that he was just out on that whole situation, and we were talking about in this program weeks ahead, I was like, if you're Juan Soto, there's just, you can look around and you can say, hey, the money's going to be awesome here. And I could stay here and bet on them to figure it out in a couple of years and go but that's a lot of plate appearances. It's a lot of plate appearances where you have no protection. That's a lot of plate appearances where you might get intentionally walked an absurd amount of times because they're just not going to throw to you because they know what's behind you is not the least bit threatening, and they're more than happy to throw their worst stuff to you and just pitch around you. That would wear on a guy. Have you seen that over the last 30 days where Judge is just opposing pitchers are just like, we really just have to get through Aaron Judge right now because everybody else is just in this free fall?
I really haven't, which is surprising because his chase rate, chase rate is one indication that he might be pressing a little bit. That really hasn't changed. He's definitely taking a ton of walks. He's not expanding the zone. He's not striking out more. So I think that he's handling this as best as possible. And I think it's a little bit of a different situation than something like the Nationals, who are actively, they're tanking, right? They did not put a good lineup around him, right? The Yankees tried, but for other circumstances, injuries, underperformance, whatnot, there's no one in the lineup that is providing him with any, sort of support or protection or anything like that right now. So I think maybe that is some, maybe he's just thinking like, these guys are good. I know they have the talent. If we can just get back whole, I can stay steady and we can turn this around. Whereas with Juan Soto, it was like, what am I doing here? Like, I got like these AAA guys. I got, nobody's around me. Like, I don't care. Right. So.
I like it. The biggest, we talked about injuries a little bit, and the injuries have gotten bad. Anthony Rizzo, the latest to the IL, and we'll see what that means for this team and how long he's out. But the biggest injury concern for you, Katie, going forward is with who?
For me, it's DJ LeMahieu. And the reason is because through July, he was the second most valuable player on the Yankees. If you look at WAR, taking into account his hitting, his defense, and everything that he does, he was literally the second most valuable player next to Judge. He was at, this is through July, he was at 285, a 389 OBP. The slugging was a little low at 424, but he led the AL in walks at the end of July. And he was really that catalyst at the top of the lineup, right? And that's what they need. They need people to get on base in front of Judge and Stanton and whoever's going to try and hit behind him. But he really was providing that. And over his last 20 games, and we know he's injured, right? We know he's injured. He's not on the IL. But over his last 20 games, he's hitting 128 with a 179 OBP. And he has no extra base hits, 17 strikeouts, and 5 walks in those 20 games. Like that is the definition of a black hole in the lineup. I mean, and he's trying to play through it. He's sitting today, but if he can get, when he was right, he was rolling and he was providing protection for Judge. He was getting on base. And he was really just that spark that the Yankees needed. And right now, I think that if anybody can turn it around, if they need somebody to turn around, it has to be him.
If he doesn't, though, what does Aaron Boone do in the postseason with LeMahieu and the top of that lineup?
I think he's still going to run him out there just because of the track record, right? We saw what DJ did last year when he tried to play through an injury. It wasn't pretty, but there really aren't very many options. Especially, you would say, oh, well, Benintendi. Well, Benintendi's hurt, right?
Yep.
I mean, I there's just I really don't know.
You're running out of bodies.
Cabrera.
Yeah.
Who do you put it there at the top of the lineup if you don't have DJ at this point?
So this is interesting too, because I think there was a lot of smoke and there was a lot of stuff. It seemed like Yankees fans were really upset at the Harrison Bader for Jordan Montgomery trade at the deadline. And that was a point of contention for a lot of Yankees fans. And Brian Cashman, who is still by and large a very good Major League Baseball general manager, he has done a really, really good job. He's just still there. And it's just one of those things where I think some folks just love to hate him because you just are around somewhere for so long that you kind of know how they operate. You know what Brian's going to kind of do, and you kind of know where things are going. But I think it caught a lot of folks by surprise that they would move on from Jordan Montgomery because of how thin the margin was with that starting rotation. And you're seeing that now a little bit where, man, like one or two guys go down this rotation, we're in real trouble. Like it's great what we got from Nestor Cortez this year, but that was an outlier. That was not something that was expected coming into the year one bit. Jordan Montgomery was just solid. And it was like, do we really need a Harrison Bader in this lineup? Do we really need a Harrison Bader when we have something like in Jordan Montgomery where not an ace by any means, but just someone you can count on each week? Now that it's been a couple months and now that you've had some time to think about it and like see what Jordan's done in St. Louis and what this rotation's looked like since then and what Bader's been like, was that overblown, the response to the Montgomery for Bader trade?
I think it was a little bit overblown. And because the Yankees actually, it's their pitching that has carried them. And in hindsight, if you look back, they probably needed more bats. They probably needed more depth in their lineup. I mean, obviously, you could not have foreseen some of these injuries that happened, especially with Benintendi and with Stanton. I mean, they knew Stanton was hurt, but they didn't know he was going to be this bad after getting back, and the injury is going to linger. And but in hindsight, you probably would have wanted to get some more depth in the lineup, whereas their pitching has actually been extremely good since the deadline. And yes, Jordan Montgomery made it look like a foolish trade because he performed so well out of the gate for the Cardinals, and the Yankees have literally been looking at Harrison Bader in his walking boot for the past 2 months. But if he can come back, I think that can only help them because, as I mentioned before, it's the lineup, it's the offense that has really been at the root of this collapse.
Is Taillon fixed? Is he good to go come postseason? Are you confident in him at this point?
I'm not confident in him. He's a different pitcher than he was at the beginning of the season. You can see it with his command, the number of home runs that he's giving up. Granted, a lot of them have been solo home runs, but you can't be doing that in the playoffs. And that's what scares me because one blast is what can make the difference in a game in the playoffs. It's hard to string together two or three or four singles in a playoff game against good pitching. But if there are teams that can just pop one out of the park, that could be the game. And that's where I think that's where Taillon scares me the most.
Interesting. What about Frankie Montas? How's he been in this rotation since coming over? Or kind of a disappointment? Is it still a TBD come postseason time? I think
it's still a TBD. And I think you got to give him a little bit of leeway just because of the circumstances when he came over. With having, not being around the team and coming off of an injury and, waiting, I think it was like 10 days before his first start, and kind of having that lag. And he's definitely pitched better over his last couple outings. He had, he's just had a couple clunkers, right? But I would give him some more time when he starts to kind of figure out his pitch mix and what's working for him here. So I'm a little bit more optimistic. I'm definitely more optimistic about him than about Taillon turning it around.
Interesting. How well do you think it's always so hard to figure out the impact of managers, right? In baseball, I think it's the hardest one to kind of navigate of the pro sports of like their impact and what they really do for a team. But with Aaron Boone, how well do you think he's managed this rough slide over the last 2 months, and with injuries and with lineup choices, with pitching rotation choices, when to pull guys in and out, like how he's utilized the bullpen? Have you been mostly okay with it, or do you think Boone's kind of been a factor in this slide over the last 2 months?
Yeah, I mean, like you said, it's really, really hard to figure out how much control he has over the decisions, right? We know that there is somebody in his ear in the front office or in the scouting department or whatever telling him what to do. And also the fact that there really isn't other options. Like there's no waiver trades anymore. It's really just play the guys that are hurt or play the AAA guys, right? And they're doing that. And I think that, I mean, yes, you can blame Boone for some things, but I don't really think that he should be taking the brunt of what's happening. It's the players, right? The players have to perform. And you look at all the different lineups that he's put out, but he's just trying to do some sort of spark, right? And if you look at the numbers, like for the entire season, the Yankees don't have like a ton of different lineups, like an extraordinary amount compared to other teams. People always say, oh, well, we have so many different lineups. Every other team does too. I've looked at the numbers. It's just something that fan bases like to complain about. And I do see the value in having a consistent lineup. I absolutely think that that's something that teams should strive for. Because players do perform better when they know where they're going to be. But his hands are really tied right now. Like there really isn't much he can do. It should be up to the players to perform.
Who among the AL East contenders down the stretch here? We can throw the Boston Red Sox out here, but the Orioles, just an awesome story here down the stretch. Seller to the deadline, continuing on. Gunnar Henderson in the building. But when you look at the O's, the Rays, who will just never go away completely, and even though they've had the injury season from hell in a lot of ways, that they're making it through. And the Blue Jays, who were the scariest team in baseball this time last year. Of those three, who scares you the most down the last little bit of stretch run of the 2022 MLB season?
For me, it's definitely the Blue Jays. And the reason is because they have a lot of good young talent of opposition players: Vladimir Guerrero, Bo Bichette, Kevin Biggio, Alejandro Kirk. A lot of good young talent. And then they also have a really strong top of the rotation. So 1-2 in Kevin Gausman and Alek Manoah. And those guys are frontline starters. They're workhorses. They're Bulldogs, right? And then this was a really interesting stat that I found. They have probably the deepest lineup in the major leagues. So they are the only team in MLB that has 7 players with at least 400 plate appearances, that is hitting at a 10% above league average rate. So providing at least 10% above league average. That's better than league average. 400 plate appearances, so they're regular players. They have 7 of those. They're the only team in majors that have that. So their lineup is just stacked, top to bottom. So they are probably the team, just that combination, pitching, young talent, deep lineup, that scares me the most. For the and I think they're about six behind right now as we tape this. So there's definitely a chance, and they play them at the end of the season. There is one still remaining series against the Blue Jays.
Do you still feel that way, like that the Blue Jays could win this division? Do you think, would it still not just completely blow your mind if the Yankees actually ended up not winning this division?
Oh, it would blow my mind. Yes, absolutely. 6 games is a lot to make up.
Yeah.
In less, 3 weeks, right? With only 3 games remaining against the Yankees, right?
You need a sweep there.
Yeah. So I would say if they had, 6 or 9 games against the Yankees left, which would be weird, but it would be possible. But the fact that there aren't so many head-to-head meetings makes it really tough for me to see the Blue Jays winning the division.
What are some numbers that should make Yankees fans feel a bit more at ease at this point mid-September, Katie? Where does the optimism come from?
Well, I mean, you start with Judge.
Mm-hmm.
Those numbers that I said of his last 30 days. If he can, I mean, he's doing it right now. He's carrying the team. If he can do it for the rest of the rest of the season, that would be great.
Mm-hmm.
Something else I'll throw out there is that on paper, they do have the easiest remaining schedule among any of the AL East contenders. So there's that. I mean, it's on paper, but whatnot. And then it's the pitching for me. If you look at those same last 30 days, the pitching has a 3.24 ERA, and the starters have allowed more than 3 runs in only 4 of 26 games. So the starting pitching and the pitching as a whole is giving the Yankees a chance to win basically every night. So like I said before, it's up to the offense, other players not named Judge, to kind of step up.
I like it. We'll end on this. Now that you've seen like just the highs of the highs and the lows of this Yankee season, do you still feel that this is a team that could win when they get a little bit healthier, that can still win a World Series this year? Do you think it's still a possibility based on what they have and who can still come back down the stretch?
Absolutely. I mean, if you look at this team, when they're healthy, there's no reason why they could be a World Series contender. It's like I said before, it's the matter of getting healthy, though. Like these injuries, if they still linger, if DJ doesn't get right, if Rizzo can't come back, if Stanton is going to be, hitting 110 for the rest of the season, then there's nothing. But yeah, at full strength, we saw what they did at full strength, right? The first 2-3 months of the season, that was full strength Yankees, and they were almost unbeatable.
Katie, this was great. Thank you so much for making the time this afternoon. What can the good folks check out from you this week all across the internet? What would you like to plug as we wrap up here today?
Yeah, just you can follow me on Twitter. It's KT, the letters KT Sharp. And then I do a weekly thing on Talkin Yanks. It usually comes out Tuesdays, or usually comes out on Tuesdays. This week it came out on Wednesday. So check that out, Sharp Stats segment. And yeah, that's about it.
There you go, Katie. Keep up the great work. Thank you. I mean, the Braves are right now in the thick of things, making life significantly more painful for the Mets, as they are now tied as of this recording.
That's right.
Atop the NL East, which is just great. I have no idea how it's going to end, but Scherzer going to the IL today. Like it's not looking great for the Metropolitans down the stretch here. So hopefully the Braves can keep this new division streak going down the stretch here. So Yankees, Braves. I think baseball is just better when they're both in the playoffs and at the peak of their powers. Katie, thank you so much. Have a great rest of your day, and we'll have to reconnect again soon.
Yep. Thanks so much for having me on, Chase.